Hello and welcome everybody to the webinar for our new offering for Azure Monitor. So welcome to our webinar for the NiCE Active 365 monitoring for Azure. This is a very special webinar. So it's one since many years we are in the process of launching a new product line, and this is not anymore on Microsoft System Center Operations Manager, but it's now designed for Azure and Azure Monitor. So everything you see today lives in Azure in Active 365 and gives details on how to manage your deployment of Office 365 and Microsoft 365. So with this, I want to start and give a very short overview and what we're doing at NiCE, and give you an overview also of our current portfolio of products. NiCE has been around for over 25 years now, and over the years we integrate with a number of different products for monitoring. The first was many years back the OpenView product from Hewlett-Packard. Now the Micro Focus Operations Bridge, the second on this list here. Then most of you know us from the SCOM space, which is our main product line. But with this webinar, we're announcing a new product line which integrates into Microsoft Azure. We're bringing this to a global customer base. Today, we have more than 500 customers in various continents, many different countries, and also on the call with me are here many of my colleagues from different locations where we're working from around the globe, and also have many customers with us. So thank you for joining, and let me start to focus on the topic we have today here. So some of the key challenges we are facing in the cloud world is really to know what is going on in my cloud deployment. The cloud is really a service, and we often don't know if of the SLA we bought, the service level agreements we have made with Microsoft, if they are actually matched, if Microsoft can deliver up to them. So in this case, we can obviously retrieve information about the Microsoft 365 ecosystem and how it's performing. And you typically do this on the Microsoft Health dashboard that is available, also called Service Health. And here you obviously, or in most, you often see a number of alerts coming out. Like as an example, I brought up here some from the last month here. There are issues like some customers or some end users cannot join live meetings, or there's a problem with accessing a specific SharePoint site. If you see this as an administrator, it often really gives you some headache, and you wonder, are my users affected? Is this actually applying to us, or is this like a general service degradation that is happening, but my specific tenant is not affected? So the main use case which we cover is here to give you a real understanding of your end user experience. How are your users that are using the service from Microsoft actually experience the service, and do I get enough information from my service health that I have a good understanding if the service is working or not? So with this, we're announcing today the Active 365 Monitor for Azure as a private preview. You can sign up today, and there is a limited availability for this, and it's actually offered for the Azure Marketplace. So they'll cover this in a bit detail. So, but it's ready for preview now, and it's built actually on the Active 365 management pack you might know from SCOM, but it decouples the integration part in SCOM and has its own integration into Azure, giving some more details in a moment. So when we provide the solution, what are the key features here? And as already mentioned, the main point is really to understand your end user experience of Microsoft 365 services. That do you get what you actually paid for? So this is really the question. Is Microsoft delivering those services in a performant and available way that Obviously, this should be specific to your tenant and that directory you're using, and not global for all the services. Up to date, we cover a number of services, including Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and the Office platform as well, and obviously Exchange, which is on there as a hybrid solution as well. The integration is to Azure and Azure Monitor, and the active monitoring part, and that's actually why we call this active 365 monitoring, because it's actively probing and checking your sites. It's checking your internet breakouts from different locations. So it's not merely just going to using an API request and seeing if the data is there, if Azure think it's healthy. We really make sure that emails can be sent in Exchange, that SharePoint can answering in a responsive way, and as well you can download and upload files. We do multi-tenant support, which is highly available as well now in this offer. So and as well we have the offer in the marketplace. So these are in a nutshell, so to say, the key feature of the solution. Let me talk about the benefits we bring to you with the solution, or which was driving this development. So if you and your help desk have somebody calling in and say, well, they're having a problem uploading a file for their SharePoint, their help desk needs some tool to troubleshoot that. So there can be many problems in that area. So for example, it is the internet connection on the client. It might be the client system. It might be some where you're on a remote location and have insufficient connection to the Microsoft backbone, or there might be a simple problem with the authentication infrastructure that is in there. So to pinpoint a problem, that's why we developed a solution, and that's where the benefit comes from. And with that, obviously, it should help and to actually save time when there's a problem, do the root cause analysis. In the end, we provide a full end-to-end service monitoring. So for the services, the Microsoft services we are monitoring, you can actually see actual end user performance, and I will show that in a moment. Let's go back and talk a bit about the design and the architecture. The design principles that were brought into the solution were really that is use what you have. If you're using Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Office 365 systems, you have typically an Azure subscription, you have a directory, and this is already Azure monitoring is part of that. So it is not bringing the challenge with it that with our management pack, you basically have to have a SCAR management group to use the product. With this, the Azure monitoring is already there. The second point here is that we always try to use the minimal permissions required. So and every permission we request to be granted, we need to make sure that it is really needed and we can justify why it's needed. So obviously, if you want to retrieve some SharePoint usage, you need to give access to retrieve the reports for that. Or if you really want to do the full sign-on test the full sign-on experience through a SharePoint site, you need to allow the permissions to do the sign-on and so on. So that is something we really focused on over the last month. And as this now lives in Azure Monitor, you need to have a subscription. You will need to pay consumption for ingesting the data in the Azure resources. We optimize that and don't overload or bring too much data into the log analytics storage in Azure to cause unnecessary costs here. The solution should be easy to deploy. This is why we put a private preview out there. Preview does require quite a number of manual steps to configure. So that is something that for the private preview is required. The data we collect or the collector is collecting is brought into Log Analytics data store, and it's open, so it's you can use the data in any other interface you're using for visualization in other dashboards and other products. So this is something you can also bring to other products as well. It's a modular approach, so we have different modules. So the core module, the collector module, actually comes from the Active 365 management pack, and this is a mature solution out there in the market for more than 3 years now, and also this allows us to bring future extensions to that through this modular approach, where we can add additional services, for example, to be monitored. Let's talk a bit about Azure Monitor as the key part we're working on. Azure Monitor consists of a various number of components. So the key I want to focus on is the metrics and the log analytics data store. So that's where the data is held. The data comes in there through a number of different sources. So they can come from applications via application insights, operating system, Azure resource subscription, and the tenant itself. Much data goes into that right now. On the other side, we have different options to work with this data. So we can either visualize it in dashboards in Power BI and use workbooks, or we could gain insights into the data through application insight, VM insights, or insight solutions or Azure solutions, like the new solution for container insights from Microsoft. The analytics part is either done in log analytics with the Custom query language, KQL, or we can use the metric explorer to look at the metrics we are putting in there. And then obviously there's an alerting facility. You can define alerts based on that data. And again, then later export via APIs, other data, or integrate that. So the key item we are working around is the custom sources and the application insight. So the application insight is a component in Azure or a service in Azure that can be used to bring data about application into this metrics space and metric storage and the log storage. And this is the key solution basically we use. So from an architecture, this would lead basically to this data collector architectures. And on the left side, we basically have the Microsoft 365 services that are monitored. So those services include like OneNote, SharePoint, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, and others that we are adding over the next time, over the next releases. Where we had in the past like a collector infrastructure via Microsoft System Center, we have now a collector virtual machine. So this virtual machine is actually hosting the same type of collector or probe agent that tests and retrieves data from the Microsoft 365 services by using different APIs like Graph API, Azure Management APIs, and also more legacy APIs, Exchange Web Services, for example, to retrieve the data, probe services, and do send emails and a whole lot of other items. Like for Teams, we do actually have chat bot functionality in there to test that the chat functionality is working. And then on the integration side, we have a component which is the NiCE Cloud Connector, which allows us to bring this data to the Azure space, including Azure Monitor. It actually uses application insights to upload this data and the upload APIs from application insight, and then we have the metrics in Azure Monitor available, and I'll show that later in a demo. All right, so the technologies used here actually is just a slide you might look at. What like it really goes into all of the latest and greatest, if you like, from Azure and Azure Monitor. So we use custom metrics, we use workbooks, we use Azure VMs, we use the KQL, the query language for Cousteau, for the log analytics workspace, and everything is grouped under the name of Azure Monitor. So let's go over to the different deployment options we have here. So as I talked about the Azure VM, so the Azure VM actually that does the collection is a deployable is a VM image. So this image can be deployed onto Azure, obviously. It can also deploy to other Hyper-V systems. So it is at this point available in the Azure Marketplace as a private preview function. So and once you've access to that, you can actually then go in and deploy it to your subscription. You can make it part of an availability set for high availability. You can have also multiple VMs deployed and feeding into the same application inside application. So this way you not have only redundancy, but also you can scale across multiple tenants. You can scale across multiple services. So the scalability is a whole different story than from what we know from System Center Operation Manager. So this is the cloud-only deployment. Obviously, the question, what are the disadvantages here? So the disadvantages of the solution here are really that you don't have a tie-in of your infrastructure where your users are sitting. So assuming you have like an office location in Ireland and people are sitting in Ireland and can't log in, and they're calling you help desk, and you say, well, everything is fine, but your VM sits on Azure, which is basically the same data center as the services, so there might be not a real impact. So the solution is more like from a statistical perspective and a reporting perspective around usage of interest, but not really from an end user monitoring perspective. For the end user monitoring perspective, we need to take a different approach here. So this is the second type of deployment. So when the deployment would use actually so-called geo proxies, which are deployed to different locations. Customers are or offices where customers are work from, or they use where the internet breakout is. So this is really around the internet breakout and which location you want to verify with this. So you can actually place those in different locations. So in our example, we have one location in the United States, in the East Coast location, one in Europe, and one in Australia. So these will come up later also during the demo. So I then will show how the response times, for example, to log on to an Exchange mailbox to open like an Outlook client, for example, are different between Sydney and Ireland and United States. There's one more deployment scenario you can use here, what we are preparing at this point. So when we mentioned here that this is available with the GA release coming later this year, and I'll give more details when we get to the roadmap a bit later. But the idea is really here to not use just so to say a proxy at the location, but at the VM image that can be used at this location and measures then not just the availability, but also performance and other data from that specific location to that service. It can actually be combined with the previous approach as well. So building a distributed deployment with geoproxies is also supported. And again, the data flows all into application insights and is then visible in the Azure Monitor. Okay, let's talk a bit about the visualization options. So we've been doing a lot of data collection with the collectors. So we collected data around the Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, and so on. And I'll go in a moment a bit deeper what we actually collect in terms of data there. So the data is now available in the Log Analytics workspace, and it's there for universal use. So you can use the so-called KQL, the acoustic query language, to go in there and query the data. But if you're not familiar, not happy to use that, data is also available in the Metrics Explorer, but even more important in the so-called workbooks. So the workbook books that ship with the solution give you a bit of a possibility with predefined queries and allow you to visualize the data which is on there. And obviously the data can also be used in Power BI, and I'll give you a demo and a view on that in a moment. So with that, I will go over to the demo environment. So give me a moment and we'll switch over to the demo environment. Okay, this is the Azure portal. In the Azure portal, you have the section of applications insights, and this is basically the starting point where we have defined a new application solution here. So which I'll pick right in this case here, and we'll actually go to the here. Let's go in here. Put this away, and so the area where we will go to is the monitoring of the workbook. So and that's where the data is then available for the Active 365 monitoring. We have a number of workbooks here. So in the gallery, so I would just start with one to get this data and look at the data. So first, obviously, you would need to choose a tenant. So as I said in the beginning, this can be multiple tenants. So when this is tested and works with no limitations of tenants at this point in time. So because the number of tenants can typically be per collector VM only a few, but you can use multiple collector VMs to feed the data into the same application insights application. So that actually means that if you're a service provider and have like many different tenants, the data can also be made easily visible here. So I selected a tenant and I have a counter, which is the Exchange Web Server response time from an end user perspective. So there's a user that actually logs on to Exchange, and when it logs on to Exchange, it will measure the time of how long does it take. And this check is done from a different locations actually. So the collector VM actually uses the geo proxies, one in Virginia, which is East US, Ireland, Europe, and Sydney in Australia, to log on using this specific test user account. And when we select, for example, the local host, just unselect that and just take the other ones here to compare those. So we have here now the Virginia, Ireland, and Sydney, and as this is a West Europe tenant, the data center is where this runs is typically either Amsterdam or in Ireland, or in Austria. So that's another location of the West Europe region. So, and here we actually see the logon time from that location, or the logon time from, in this case, Sydney, is taking longer than that we measure from Virginia or from Ireland. Obviously, Ireland is the fastest, as this is very close by in terms of the tenant location, and Sydney is the furthest away. So beside the Exchange Web Service response time, we have more advanced metrics, for example, the mailbox logon check, or we could take a look at, let's check the mailbox. So we have mailbox logon check. As one is here as an example. So that's always 0 because it's more for a reporting perspective. So we basically log on and verify that the logon works fine. We have the mailbox logon duration. So this is it measuring how long it takes for a specific user to log on to the mailbox. And in this case, we also see that it takes only a number of milliseconds to log on from the different locations. There are specific graphs with more detail around one specific location, and there are some additional performance counters to analyze breakouts from the regular procedure. But I rather like to walk through a couple of more performance counters we do here. So besides the logon for Exchange, we do also monitor like mail flow, for example. So the mail flow latency, and we have to just pick a specific. So the mail flow latency is basically measured from the local host, and we see it typically takes around 3 seconds to send one email from one Exchange online mailbox to another. And we have this for the last 7 days. So there were typically no times where this took significantly longer. So, and this, we could check also the granularity here in minutes, but I'll just leave it with the standard right now, and it gives I'll just put it to 4 days. Just back to 2 days. 1 hour. Get this data for the last 2 days, which is the mail flow. And if there would be, for an example, a specific problem where mails cannot be sent, then this would create well, the threshold. If we put the threshold, that would be violated, and you can get yourself an alert triggered. So besides Mailflow, we do FreeBusy resource sharing tests, and also we do monitor Microsoft Teams. So for Microsoft Teams, we have, let's see what we have, just use Teams. This is a chat test, basically what we're doing. So it measures the time it takes to users chat with each other in Teams. So I've seen in the previous poll, like about everybody is using Teams, and Teams is really a very fast-growing product at Microsoft, and we see a lot of requests for that. So and this is one of the monitors we offer with it, where you can actually check how good the performance is if two users in your organization are chatting with each other. There's OneDrive. So for OneDrive, we do test, for example, how long does it take for a OneDrive user to upload a file, and so we have data for that. So we can also pin, like, again, different locations here, and verify, like, if somebody uploads a file from Sydney, obviously that takes longer than if somebody goes and uploads a file from Ireland to a West Europe tenant, and this gives you a good tool to actually help to pinpoint problem. If somebody calls your help desk and says, well, I have a problem actually right now uploading a file, then you can actually go in here and see if this is a general problem or this is a problem specific for this user. All right, so I will not go through all the different metrics which are in here, all the different performance counters that bring you data. There's a separate workbook I like to go in there, which is dealing especially with SharePoint. So let me open this workbook for SharePoint, and also it uses the same number of geo proxies here. So, and I'll just uncheck the localhost for now again to take this data out, just having from the different locations. So in SharePoint, obviously we can have multiple sites. So we have different sites right now in here. So we can add a site to this. So obviously then the graph gets a bit more crowded with different data, but you already see that they're kind of overlapping. The response time from sites is pretty similar in the different region, while obviously the above one for the SharePoint site that are accessed via Australia is different than the answer time that when it comes from the US or Europe to request here. So let me deselect one of the sites again here and look also what other performance counters we have available. So besides the logon duration, one of the most important features is to upload and download files. And we measure that time. So the collector goes in there and measures every couple of minutes if a file can be uploaded. And if there's a longer delay, then we can actually see a spike on the time axis, on the time here, and see that, for example, in this time, was guess yesterday or this morning at 1 a.m. It took a slightly bit longer, but just actually from Australia. From the other location, the upload here was still the same, but just from Australia, it took a bit longer to upload a specific file. You can define, like, for example, the size of the file and others, so that's all part of the configuration. Similar to upload, we also do have the download. So let's pick the download here, and if you download a file, again we see sometimes a few spikes, but this really gives them an indication how long does it take to download a specific file. This is a file where the size is defined again, and the downloaded file is randomly generalized to prevent it from caching, so to say. Obviously, you want to know how fast the page renders if users can see it quite quickly. So we have the latency of the IIS, which is behind that. So it also just gives an overview here, again, from the different locations. Typically, this is really fast rendering time, obviously much faster than downloading a file, but still we see that it varies over the time, but this is very low in most cases here. So next there is the SharePoint Online storage size, so which is also an interesting feature we have here. So we actually this is also part of the preview only, so we can actually for the preview understand, like, how large our, or how much do we use of our storage, SharePoint Online storage size. So we've got dedicated a number of gigabyte for that, but over time, obviously, this fills up, so we can monitor this very closely. And this is a part of a range of new features on reports as well, to understand a bit better how much we are using of this space, and if we have specific sites that are larger than others. So we in future going to add more reporting capabilities on that, and compare the size of the different SharePoint sites with each other, and be able to put thresholds on top of that. So these were these two workbooks, and yeah, there are more workbooks on here. So we covered SharePoint, and we can also go into the data center perspective and mailboxes. So this is more type of information where we can see the different data centers that are currently used for Exchange mailboxes. So this is where our data mailboxes are currently residing. So for this tenant, they're in Dublin and in Austria. So you can also get these details in here to actually understand from what location to what location they are moving. So because mailboxes move between locations, we can track that, and if required, also put an alert to that. So finally, we do monitoring and provide reporting on alerting on licenses, sorry. So we can actually see the number of licenses that are currently used, and put a threshold to that if they exceed a certain number, for example, or if they're fall below a certain threshold of a free license, then alert can be triggered, and it can be used also for reporting. This is more for multiple tenants design. So if you have in a service provider scenario, you have multiple tenants, you can get a very fast overview of which tenants use how many licenses. So with that, I gave you a first overview of what is part of the solution so far, and I'll go back to the slides for a moment. Besides the visualization, I like to give you some guidance, or basically also request, like if you like to try out the solution, we are actively looking right now for private preview partners who are interested in previewing the solution. So if you have a subscription you would like to deploy this to, we would basically need to enable the subscription to see the solution in the marketplace. So with the subscription ID, we register then the subscription ID in the private preview, and then it will become available in the marketplace, and I'll show that in a moment. And from there you can actually deploy this. It's a VM image that is deployed to your subscription, and then after the VM starts up, you can go in there and configure the application inside integration, and you can as well configure the monitoring of the Active 365 services. So, and let me also go to the demo environment and show how that would look. This is market. We'll just go to the marketplace. All right. And so once you're enabled, you have a private solution available, and you see basically here, this would be the private solution that is listed. And you can go right in here, and from here create a VM, which is the starting point, and the image is pre-selected for you here. And basically you can start then in this case deploying this, and then later configuring this. So there is some documentation which we provide to you if you're interested in trying this, and also we provide you assistance in setting this up. So it's really deployed right from the Azure Marketplace. So it's you don't need to download MSI installers or anything. Everything is pre-configured and preset already in this VM image. If you want to use other tools to visualize this data, here are some screenshots from Power BI. So you can also use that reporting and get additional insights. So if you're familiar with Power BI, you can use this. You can also track much better the movement between data centers or the mailboxes between data centers. So that is also an option that is available here with that. All right, so we're coming towards the end of our presentation. So last slide, but that's probably one of the most interesting slides, is the release roadmap. So currently we are right over here at the private preview. So sign up today. So you can either just answer to any of the mails from the registration you got. You can submit the request via our website, or in the end, I also provide like a contact details on the slide set here. So so the private preview actually, as I described, we will basically register the subscription ID for the preview you want to use, and then you can go ahead and deploy this. So that's what is available today with all the functionalities I just showed you. We're currently working on a couple of new items, like, for example, you saw already some screenshots on Power BI, so we'll also plan to prepare a package set for that. There's more documentation to be added, plus then obviously it will be a public offer on the marketplace. And there's currently it's a VM offer, but it will become more like a solution on Azure that will be offered. So this is part of this plan. And obviously the deployment will get easier for the GA release. Currently, there's still a number of manual steps that are required. So if you want to take advantage of the free services we're offering around that, please feel free to request those. Once we move to GA, we'll and that's planned towards the end of Q3 this year. So we'll just probably just after summer where we plan this, and then we'll provide additional monitoring on SharePoint Online, site monitoring. Dynamics will be a part of that. So we have already Dynamics monitoring with the management pack. So, and then all the data which you have in Dynamics and you want to use Dynamics for will become part or can be made part of the Azure monitoring as well. There's a additional CSP for cloud service provider support to really allow like many different tenants to easily configure and onboard and offboard. Central configuration, so if you're using the distributed deployment approach, that you can actually then also easier configure that from a central perspective. A new function around Azure AD Connect, and there are some other developments planned here as well. Okay, I see one question on the product structure and pricing. So the product structure is in terms of it will be defined based on the size of your tenants. So it's tenant based. So if you have one tenant, we look in the number of size of user, and then there's a subscription price priced for that. So there's a, let's say, for example, you have 10,000 users in your tenant, then we do not count a specific user. So it's more about you have like a medium-sized tenant, we call it, and then there's a price point for this, which includes, and this is subscription price following the SIME model as the active the license from Microsoft. And if you're more interested in more details on that, then please send an email and we're happy to provide that. Yeah, so there was a question on the services. Yes, we do monitor the SharePoint Online, the Exchange Online, and also there's the option for hybrid. So if you have a hybrid deployment, that means where you have still an on-prem Exchange server, there might be possibilities we can facilitate that as well. It will require the distributed approach you have seen earlier, because we need to basically also monitor your Exchange server in this scenario. So we need to have connection to that as well. So, but that is something we have on the roadmap. Let me open the contact details slide here. So if you want to make a note, so the contact we have are solutions@nice.de. Thank you all for listening in today. And with this, I close the call. Thank you all and have a good day.